Okay. Ed Henry. Q. Thank you, Mr. President. I want to follow up on that because and Merry Christmas, by the way. President Obama, Merry Christmas to you. Q. When Edward Snowden first started leaking the information, you made a statement on June 7 in California. And you claimed to the American people that you had already reformed many of these surveillance programs. You said you came into office, my team evaluated them. We scrubbed them thoroughly, we actually expanded some of the oversight, and you did expand some of it. President Obama, yes. Q. You also said we may have to rebalance some, there may be changes. But you concluded with, you can complain about Big Brother and how this is a potential program run amok. But when you actually look at the details, then I think we've struck the right balance. That was only 6 months ago. Now this judge is saying no, your own panel is saying no, even you're saying no. We haven't really struck the right balance perhaps, that changes have to be made. My question is, were you wrong then because you were not fully read in not just on these programs? But on other programs outside of the ones you just talked about, where we were potentially listening in on the German leaders. The Brazilian leaders and others, that suggest there were abuses? Number 1. And number 2, if you were fully read in on these programs. Is it another example of what Julie was getting at with this question of credibility with the American people? That just like on healthcare, you like your plan, you can keep it? On surveillance, you looked the American people in the eye 6 months ago and said, we've got the right balance, and 6 months later you're saying maybe not. President Obama, well, hold on a second, Ed. I think it's important to note that when it comes to the right balance on surveillance, these are a series of judgment calls that we're making every single day. Because we've got a whole bunch of folks whose job it is to make sure that the American people are protected. And that's a hard job, because if something slips, then the question that's coming from you the next day at a press conference is, Mr. President, why didn't you catch that? Why did the intelligence people allow that to slip? Isn't there a way that we could have found out that in fact this terrorist attack took place? Q. So why did you say we struck the right balance? President Obama, so the point is, Ed. Not that my assessment of the 215 program has changed in terms of technically how it works. What is absolutely clear to me is that given the public debate that's taken place and the disclosures, that have taken place over the last several months, that this is only going to work if the American people have confidence and trust. Now, part of the challenge is that because of the manner in which these disclosures took place, in dribs and drabs, oftentimes shaded in a particular way. And because of some of the constraints that we've had in terms of declassifying information and getting it out there. That trust in how many safeguards exist and how these programs are run has been diminished. So what's going to be important is to build that back up. And I take that into account in weighing how we structure these programs. So let me just be very specific on the 215 program. It is possible, for example, that some of the same information that the intelligence community feels is required to keep people safe can be obtained by having the private phone companies keep these records longer and to create some mechanism where they can be accessed in an effective fashion. That might cost more. There might need to be different checks on how those requests are made. There may be technological solutions that have to be found to do that. And the question that we're asking ourselves now is, does that make sense not only because of the fact that there are concerns about potential abuse down the road with the metadata that's being kept by a government rather than private companies. But also, does it make sense to do it because people right now are concerned? That maybe their phone calls are being listened to, even if they're not. And we've got to factor that in. So my point is that the environment has changed in ways that I think require us to take that into account. But the analysis that I've been doing throughout has always been periodically. Looking at what we're doing and asking ourselves, are we doing this in the right way? Are we making sure that we're keeping the American people safe, number one? Are we also being true to our civil liberties and our privacy and our values? I understand it's a tough job, and, God forbid, there's another terror attack. Every one of us is going to be second guessing you, and that is extremely difficult to be in the Oval Office. President Obama, that's okay. I volunteered. But as you said, you took that on. President Obama, yes. You put it on your back. And so my question is, do you have any personal regrets? You're not addressing the fact, the public statements you've made to reassure the public. Your Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, months ago went up. Got a question from a Democrat, not a Republican, about whether some of this was going on, and he denied it. Doesn't that undermine the public trust? President Obama, Ed, you're conflating, first of all, me and Mr. Clapper. He's the Director of National, he's still on the job. President Obama, I understand. But what I'm saying is this, that, yes. These are tough problems that I am glad to have the privilege of tackling. Your initial question was whether the statements that I made 6 months ago are ones that I don't stand by. And what I'm saying is is that the statements I made then are entirely consistent with the statements that I make now. Which is that we believed that we had scrubbed these programs and struck an appropriate balance. And there had not been evidence, and there continues not to be evidence, that the particular program had been abused in how it was used. And that it was a useful tool, working with other tools that the intelligence community has. To ensure that if we have a thread on a potential terrorist threat, that can be followed effectively. What I've also said, though, is that in light of the disclosures that have taken place, it is clear that whatever benefits the configuration of this particular program, may be outweighed by the concerns that people have on its potential abuse. And if that's the case, there may be another way of skinning the cat. So we just keep on going at this stuff and saying, can we do this better? Can we do this more effectively? I think that the panel's recommendations are consistent with that. So if you had a chance to read the overall recommendations, what they were very clear about is we need this. Intelligence. We can't unilaterally disarm. There are ways we can do it potentially that gives people greater assurance that there are checks and balances, that there's sufficient oversight, sufficient transparency. Programs like 215 could be redesigned in ways that give you the same information when you need it without creating these potentials for abuse. And that's exactly what we should be doing, is to evaluate all these things in a very clear, specific way, and moving forward on changes. And that's what I intend to do. Q. So you have no regrets? You have no regrets? President Obama, that's what I intend to do. John Carl. Q. Thank you, Mr. President. It's been a tough year. You may not want to call it the worst year of your presidency. But it's clearly been a tough year. The polls have gone up and down, but they are at a low point right now. So what I'm asking you've acknowledged the difficulties with the healthcare rollout. But when you look back and you look at the decisions that you have made and what you did, what you didn't do, for you personally, what do you think has been your biggest mistake? President Obama, with respect to healthcare, specifically, or just generally? Q. The whole thing, back at this tough year. President Obama, well, there's no doubt that when it came to the healthcare rollout, even though I was meeting every other week or every 3 weeks with folks and emphasizing how important it was that consumers had a good experience. An easy experience in getting the information they need. And knowing what the choices and options were for them to be able to get high quality, affordable health care. The fact is it didn't happen in the first month, the first 6 weeks, in a way that was at all acceptable. And since I'm in charge, obviously we screwed it up. Part of it, as I've said before, had to do with how IT procurement generally is done, and it almost predates this year. Part of it, obviously, has to do with the fact that there were not clear enough lines of authority. In terms of who was in charge of the technology and cracking the whip on a whole bunch of contractors. So there were a whole bunch of things that we've been taking a look at. And I'm going to be making appropriate adjustments once we get through this year. And we've gotten through the initial surge of people who've been signing up.